If you've been watching the channel for quite some time, you might know what this is going to be. This is Project 91. This is my Macintosh Classic, which I picked up for like £40 a few years ago. It sat on my shelf. It didn't work, didn't have a keyboard, didn't have a mouse, so I think we should make it M1. We have started this project. I have got a video already up on the channel, which is me basically stripping the thing down, taking out all of the internals, but I had a huge issue. I bought an LCD controller for an iPad display to put into this thing. I hooked it up to the iPad display that I had from an iPad 3. I think I might have put the connector upside down and burnt out the display itself. So, today, I am now the proud owner of an iPad 4th generation, which the previous owner has very carefully packaged for me in this lovely bubble envelope, although I think it might be a bit late for that. So this thing has got a destroyed digitizer, and somebody has obviously had it apart because this thing is very much removed already. But that's fine because we don't need that. We just need the LCD panel from underneath it, and fingers crossed, this time I won't connect it backwards and burn the thing out. That will then become the display for this Macintosh. So we're going to have a Retina display and an M1 chip inside a Macintosh Classic from 1991. We're also then going to put inside it a few other little bits and bobs. There might be some expanded storage, maybe, I don't know, 6 terabytes or so. There's also going to be some extra SSD storage in there. There's going to be some decent speakers because the Mac Mini is horrendous with the internal speakers. They're not designed for listening to anything on, apart from kind of setting it up for accessibility reasons, as far as I understand. So don't hold that against them. But that's the plan. I want to get this thing working because having seen Tim Cook's face when a Macintosh Classic or an SE or whatever it was presented to him in India, I want to take this thing to an Apple store and try and get some tech support on it. So the first job here is extracting the display from the iPad, and helpfully the previous owner has saved me some time, as even after flipping out the broken digitizer out of the way, there was actually no screws holding the panel in place either. So it was just a case of flipping up the ribbon connector, which for some reason, looking back at this video, took me forever, and out it comes. Also turns out that the middle battery cell here is pretty puffy, which is a nice surprise. Then I hooked up the LCD ribbon to the controller board, and voila, we have a working display. This made me so happy. Next up is mounting the display inside the Macintosh chassis. So I've ordered a couple of sheets of thin perspex to sandwich the display inside using the original mounting screw points that held in the original CRT display. But of course, why would things be easy? I've just tried to fit the display on top of here, and yeah, where those screw holes are, that would be going through the outside of the display panel, and I don't think that's going to be ideal. So here's what we're going to have to do, because this is really annoying. What we're going to do is we are going to order some milliput. This is like an epoxy that you can kind of use. You can drill it afterwards. You can basically use it for whatever you want. But what we're going to do with it is we're actually going to mold our own supports for this front piece of plexiglass. That is going to hold this in place. The second piece I'm also going to have to make a cutout into the bottom of, because there is actually this display is not flat on the back. Should have thought about that before as well, and basically cut out a piece at the bottom. This is becoming more of a nightmare than I expected. And if you feel my pain at this point, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and numb it for me just a little bit. So I wrapped the perspex sheet in tin foil so that the epoxy putty wouldn't just grab straight onto the panel and hold it in place forever, and then I mixed up the milliput and started building those supports. In the end though, I did decide to move away from actually using the perspex and decided to use the milliput mount points to hold the display in directly. And while I would have liked to have the extra protection of having that perspex over the panel is imperfect in the first place, and it would have been a lot more like having the non-laminated displays in the cheaper iPads with the display sitting way back behind the glass, and honestly, I was just getting sick of messing around with the whole thing at this point. Now there's also a 3D printed surround that is glued into place around where the curved display opening translates into a flat profile for the LCD panel. This is because obviously the CRT has kind of a rounded front to the display. This time wasn't wasted though. Obviously with building these supports, it did allow me to then fit the display in the end. And I'll be honest, I used some hot glue to hold it in place. I did worry that I was going to burn the display. I didn't. Next up in the casework though was I/O. So although a lot of the work here is on internal hookups to things inside the case itself, we'll still need to be able to connect USB peripherals, things like the keyboard, which we'll come onto in a minute. So I have an Amazon 4-port USB Basics USB 3.0 hub, which will fit nicely under the CRT adjustment panel on the back of the case. So I got to work cutting a new slot for this to be attached inside the case. Now, using a hot blade made the work a lot faster because we were basically able to melt through the plastic of the vintage case. A little brief sanding with a nail board made this a pretty quick and tidy job. Took me under an hour to get this bit done. Now, the keyboard itself I actually started work on in June last year. That's when I had the idea for this project, and the keyboard itself was a review sample that I'd looked at right at the start of the channel. It was the KLIM Domination. It's mechanical and it's backlit and it feels perfect for this sleeper build. So I fully dismantled it, washed all the keycaps with a bit of washing up liquid and warm water, and then got to painting it with white primer, an ivory top coat, which I think perfectly matches the vintage Macintosh look. And painted without legends on any of the keys, it stayed from June last year until last week. Now, last week I printed out all of the key legends that I would need in Apple's Universe Italic font, which is the one that they used on the classic keyboards, onto water slide decal paper, then gave the sheet a couple of coats of matte varnish and got to work, individually cutting out the letters and the symbols, soaking them in water and then sliding them with tweezers onto the keys themselves. Now, I had to reference a couple of different vintage Apple keyboard layouts while I did it. Neither of them match perfectly, but I think this really captures the feel of those old school keyboards, and I kind of like the glow around the keys rather than that double shot look where the key legends light up in the front. It's not as useful in the dark, but you know, it looks cool. And is there a computer on Earth that doesn't suit a rainbow backlight more than a classic Mac? Then it was just a case of building the thing. I got everything slotted inside the case and almost closed it properly, but no, I think there's some wires that are snagged in there somewhere, but I will keep working on those little details. Now, it is not without its niggles, this system, by the way. This project is far from over. First, there's two issues with the display. The first one is that the iPad internal display refuses to work unless there's also a secondary display attached. I have no idea why this is. Remove the other display and the internal one can't find a signal. Answers on a postcard, but for now I'm using this WeMaxit portable display as my second monitor, and that's USB-C powered. It's actually touchscreen as well, although I'm using it over mini HDMI at the minute, but that was something that I got sent over as a sample because we were going to see how you could get macOS working as a touchscreen, and dear God, it's terrible. It's terrible to use as a touch interface for macOS right now, so don't even tell me that we need touch Macs. Now, I do have it in the back of my head that I might build a vertical enclosure for that display, because then it would look kind of like the Macintosh portrait display. Maybe a pipe dream, but we'll see. The second issue with the internal display is that it is very slightly larger than the opening in the front of the Macintosh, and I didn't want to start hacking into the Macintosh case. I was hoping I'd be able to underscan it, but I can't underscan it, so the edge of the display is not visible. If anyone knows how you can get underscanning to work on a non-underscanning supported display, or just scale the whole thing down a little bit, please do let me know in the comments. I also can't get the OG power switch on the back of the Macintosh to work with the Mac Mini, which was one of the original kind of aims of this. And the main reason is that the Mac Mini itself just doesn't power up unless you actually press the button on the back. So I'm going to need a way to poke that without dismantling the whole thing every time, because that would get inconvenient really quickly. It's annoying, but I think it's going to be quite doable. And audio was the other thing. So I put in this Edifier speaker, the MP230, which is a Bluetooth speaker, but it also has a headphone jack input. And I was like, this is going to be great. It can just run off that. But it seems almost impossible to get it to stay in jack mode when the Mac powers down. So I might have to look for another audio option too. Again, if you've got an idea for something that might fit inside this case, let me know. There is also going to be a big old hard drive that goes in there. That's just not gone in yet. And last of all, I would love to have a little MagSafe charging port sitting on top of this. Now, I tried MagSafe through the case. Unfortunately, the plastic is too thick. But my next option is potentially putting like a mount on there, which I can flip up and have MagSafe attach the phone and use it for continuity camera. I think that would be really cool because obviously this thing doesn't have a camera for FaceTime right now. I think it would be great if you could charge and use it for continuity camera at the same time though. That would be really cool. I just need to find a way of making it not ugly. So this project has a while to run, but what do you think of it so far? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you to all the Patreons for supporting the channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got a question for a future video, hashtag #ICaveAnswers down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.